live and direct. Here we are.
Yes.
Episode 12 of Tuned Up and Tuned In with Vin and Phil.
12.
And our very, 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 very special guest, Mike Montrey today.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
No, man. Thanks for being on, for real. Again, for anybody who's been paying attention the last couple of weeks, we've been talking about the band, Bob Dylan, the band. And, when we first talked about it, Vin right away was like, man, my man, Alex Tierney, we got to have him on. We got to talk about. And I was like, cool, great. I was like, we got to have Mike Montrey on also. I was like, for me, that's got to be. So really, truly, man, I'm excited to have you on because
I'm excited to talk to you guys.
Well, thank you. I guess before we dive all the way in, we last time did a terrible job and didn't do any of our bullet points. So let's nail those real fast. First and foremost, I still suck and have not changed the playlist. So the playlist you can follow along with right now is still called.
Sounds like it's getting hits though, because we keep getting text messages from buddies back home and shit, and like saying they're listening to it. And
I played the list that I was doing sound the other day, and I was using it as like the pre-show music, and people were definitely, literally like, "Man, I haven't heard this song in years," and I was like, "Awesome." So yeah, and it's getting pretty hefty though. It's like a 7-hour list, I believe. But there's not a bad song on there.
It really is true.
And so again, the name of that Spotify playlist is Vin and Phil Show. You can find it that way for now, and follow along all of the episodes. And at this point, a lot of the songs that we're going to talk about tonight have probably already been mentioned, but we'll see what we can add to it.
Maybe I might have a couple mentions up my sleeve.
Vin has some tricks up those no sleeves that he doesn't have in that shirt.
Oh, dude, I love walking around down here. Like I was in Home Depot a couple of times today, and I love walking around just looking like the fat junior soprano amongst all these hardcore Texas people. It's bringing me joy to bring that to them.
All right. I can't say that I can totally relate to that. But yeah. And then I guess next on the list is, all of us are working musicians. We all have ways of sending some tips and love and all that in our directions. So if you're feeling generous during this tough time for musicians and such, check us all out. Vin and I will put our Venmo in the descriptions, and Montrey, if you want, I'm glad to throw yours in there too. PayPal, any of that stuff, whatever you normally put up for your gigs. Or if you want to shout it out right now, go ahead. That's up to you. No pressure.
Put it in there. You put it in there later if you want to. So
all right.
I'll defer it to you guys. You guys are running the show.
All
the proceeds.
Yeah, again, all the proceeds so far amount to a massive zero. So
-$5.
Yeah.
But tonight might be our lucky night, and Mike, you may make like $300 to yourself in tips,
right?
And
I'll buy Phil some beer.
Phil and I will still make zero.
It's some proper beer.
Wet ticket from this is straight out of Rahway, New Jersey, right there.
Wow. Actually, somebody was just telling me about either a beer and or a whiskey that was local. But yeah, see, Montrey's up on his beers always. That's for sure. This is a man with a taste, I'd say. I don't know if it's a specific taste, but what would you say your taste is, Montrey?
Well, I do. Here's something that I'll say about it, and I think it relates to a lot of things. I think that the whole like small batch artisanal kind of thing, whether it's food, whether it's beer, whether it's coffee, or whatever it is, there's value in that in the sense that you get people that make stuff in smaller quantities and then more locally. Odds are it's going to taste better just because they're using better ingredients. You're getting it sooner. It's fresh, and I've really gotten into that with the beer. I mean, I've been a big fan of beer throughout my adult life.
Interesting. Me too.
But not like super excess. Like I don't
one
drink
or-
like
one or
10
two.
beers. Like,
I've had a
and there was a
couple.
time,
I've tried it a few
but
times.
and I've gravitated now, especially with the movement of like craft beer, especially in certain areas. There's so many great breweries in New Jersey, man. From like Kane, this one's Wet Ticket in Rahway. You've got so many in New Jersey that are so good. And you get these beers like they made the beer like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And you're drinking it and you taste it. You do taste the difference if you're into that, and it's good.
Nah, I respect that for sure. I can't argue with a single word.
Mike, you've obviously been to Asheville, North Carolina, right?
Asheville is what he was saying.
Yeah. We played down there a few times, but I've been there otherwise. I actually went to college in North Carolina for about a year and a half, but yes.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Asheville is a
Vin,
fun.
You're in and out, Vin. You're in and out. This is the first time it's ever happened.
It's funny.
Really?
Yeah. Now, you seem to be back now, sort of. Maybe just don't talk.
No, you're good.
I can do that. Fuck.
Nah, I'm just kidding, man. It's a freaking podcast. This guy.
Vin's frozen.
Yeah, he's
There goes again, right?
yeah. Well, nothing you can do, man. As long as you're not totally
There's a
disappearing.
dog barking outside too. And then
We don't hear that.
Anything different from
Nah, it's all right.
last week?
Blaming the dog.
Yeah, I got my noise gate on.
Maybe
Got
that's
Phil Silverberg noise gate going.
there. You go. That's why I don't hear anything. But maybe that's why you're glitchy too. You know?
Yeah.
That's the only thing different. That's all I can say. But anyway,
Yes,
last but not least,
take it
are we there, Vin?
Can you hear him?
We all have music projects that are out. That's the big last thing that I just want to put out there. Vin put out an album recently. His Bandcamp link we'll put on the description. And Montrey is, I guess, it's 2 weeks away. What do we got? What's the official release date of the whole project? You got 2 singles out.
September 25th.
Nice.
The album will be available everywhere.
Yeah, and I specifically put out the new lo-fi track on the same date to compete with that. It was
High traffic date.
so look out, Kanye and everybody else who might be putting, I don't know, Kanye, whatever. Anyway, it was totally not on purpose. Actually, I wouldn't have normally done. Not that it's like I would not have done that on purpose. It's a random day. Happened to be a Friday. It was a good
Friday's a good day. Friday's a good day to put out music in the digital world. But
that was all it was. It was a month away from the day that I was putting it in on a Friday, the nearest Friday.
It's what they tell me. Yeah, but yeah, September 25th, In the Middle of Hope, will release officially. We got Bandcamp pre-order, which has done fairly well, man. I was impressed with people. I actually had a very limited run of hard copy discs. I wasn't even going to buy any because it's like the only place you could sell them is at shows, and there are no shows. But people bought them at the show we played on Sunday.
Wow.
And I only got like a few to start, and it's crazy, man, how cheap it is now. Like I remember going back however many years, having to order boxes of CDs, man, and it was like a couple grand. Now you can get like you got to pay them; they got to pay you. It's like it's really the market is just crazy in that way. Like, but nonetheless, I did get like a short run of hard copy discs that some people have pre-ordered and stuff. So that's pretty cool.
Awesome. I'm sure Vin can tell you he caught the tail end of having to buy CDs and send them out. So
Right.
Yeah. My CDs are $1 million seller. It means there's $1 million in my cellar.
But but the record companies, they all, you know, or not the record, the radio companies, they all loved it. They all have that CD somewhere.
And there's a million more where that came from. Seller.
Well, let's hop to it, I guess. You know, the main reason we had Mike on today is to talk about Bob Dylan, the band, and all things related. And, you know, Mike, I guess for me, I just wanted to, I'd love to hear how it started for you. How did the band become a thing for you? And is it like, you know, where is it in terms of importance in your, I don't know, to music, in, you know, your musical upbringing, I suppose?
Well, I'll tell you a funny story about the first time I ever was exposed to the band. Sort of was I was probably like 11 or 12 years old, and I was at my dad's house. Growing up, my folks were divorced, and my dad had he had a pretty elaborate like stereo room. He listened to lots of different kinds of music, but his main gig was like he's a big fan of AC/DC, ZZ Top, like that range. But he branched out a variety of ways, like industrial metal at one point. Like he got, but then also, you know, some other interesting stuff. But nonetheless, one of my really good friends growing up and I were there. We're hanging out there, and we're going through. He's got like, you know, boxes of CDs, and we came upon the band, and it was, I believe it was the Greatest Hits album at the time, which was a very popular album for people who otherwise didn't really know about the band then. Had like The Night They Drove Old Dixie Down, The Weight,
It's
etc.
not everything you would want from the band.
If you didn't know about a lot of their
you
other
need a
stuff.
crash course. That's a good. It is a good one.
But the music had nothing to do with this story. What was funny to us was that they were called the band, and we just couldn't stop laughing at that. We're like, the name of the band is the band. Like, it was like, I mean, it just, we couldn't get over it. You know, we were kind of like in that quirky, like preteen years of being a kid. And I remember just laughing so much about that. And then, you know, when I finally actually listened to the album a few years later, just always I always was brought back to that, being there and just seeing that and just not being able to come to grips with the fact that the best thing they could come up with to call their band name was the band. And so that was, if you want to talk about a true introduction, that was the introduction. And it was totally out of context, but it was funny. Now, you know, fast forward several years, and I mean, you know, Bob Dylan was always kind of around in my life, in some capacity, but I'd say, you know, I get to be like 9th, 10th grade. I had an older brother who had lots of albums himself, and that I would pilfer through and get into. And, you know, Dylan was one that I came to before, and then the band afterwards. But the interesting thing about the band, I thought, at that stage in my life as a younger person was, like Vin was saying, you know, you got this Greatest Hits album, and these are songs that I'd heard in passing at other places. And that just kind of was like there for a while, right? Like, oh, this band sings this song, and it's a song I know, right? But then there was like the really uncovering of like the rest of the catalog, and then you start to get into a deeper like place with the whole like concept of music that they were trying to to create. And then, as you follow it down the rabbit hole, like when we wound up in that house in Big Pink, where a lot of that stuff evolved, right? And it just, there was a way of like, it's almost like, this particular way of explaining things, I think, is a little bit overdone sometimes. Like this whole idea of like the perfect storm kind of scenario. But that's kind of what the band, to me, essentially it represents. Like you get these guys, they come out of a life that's leading up to the beginnings of rock and roll, right? Like they're all like leading their own separate path as young kids growing up in a time when rock and roll is like first evolving. And they get thrown into situations where they get to become a band for Ronnie Hawkins, who was an older guy who had been on the blues rock circuits when that was the only thing you did was just go to some circuit in like Mississippi or wherever it might have been, play like 50 shows and go home. So these dudes play like to the extent that their musician chops become like that of the equivalent of like the studio guys of like the 60s and 70s. They're like just professional musicians. They're like 19 and they're like they played like 500 gigs in the last like 2 years, right?
Sure.
And then they run into Bob Dylan, the poet laureate, and the whole thing comes together, and then they start making music that's built on the backs of all of this circumstantial inspiration. That's like you can't make that up. It's like it's an impossible like and what you wound up with was probably one of the more unique sounds, but oddly enough, like unique, but not like unique in a way where it was any different. Like some stuff's unique because it's like unusual. I just found this to be unique because it really was just an amalgam of all of those things. And I remember I read Robbie Robertson's biography, Testimony. And one of the interesting things he talked about was when they were trying to make their first record, John Hammond was in the studio, and they had him set up in a
yeah, bye, Vin. I'm sure he'll jump back in.
Vin! But to finish that story, they had him set up in a more conventional kind of studio setup, and they were so uncomfortable with that because all they'd done is played together live that they convinced him to just let them sit in the room in a circle and play. And that's where that sound was born out of. And it became something that a lot of people tried to emulate after that. It was like a total function of everything that had happened.
Sure.
Led up to this thing. And so, I mean, but that was my, like when I dug deeper, that was what I started to realize about them. Like,
there he is.
Vin,
I don't know.
you missed everything, Vin.
Nothing is different.
And that's our show.
Nothing has been done differently.
I
don't know. What to say.
Honestly, since you've came back in, your connection seems way like a whole lot stronger. Seriously.
Well, only time will tell, brother.
Yeah, no,
The
it's
world's
not,
an imperfect place, Vin.
Huh?
The world's an imperfect place.
You know what? This is bad Wi-Fi reception is a small price to pay for living in a gorgeous place that I live in now. So fuck
There you go.
whatever. If this is the end of Vinny being on the grid, then good riddance. So long, suckers. You fucks. You fucking cocksuckers.
Well, now this episode is rated R, and
Harry.
We're still working on, by the way, the official Vinny F-bomb counter.
Yes.
That will be inserted into the
right on the side
video.
Yeah, it's just going to be a counter
version of these episodes. Yeah.
We're going to give away beer koozies if you guess the number.
Again, a million seller. My beer koozies were a million seller. I have a million of them still in my cellar.
Oh, is that what the joke is? Oh.
You never heard it before? I haven't said it 1,000 times on this podcast alone. No, I know.
Well, you finished the end of Montrey's story, but it was excellent.
Damn.
Well,
Sorry, it's on there. It'll be on there.
Yeah, no.
Again, I don't know what the fuck's happening. I'm sorry about that. Fucking.
We're all good, man. Ain't nobody stressing except you. Seems, I'm calm, man. I'm calm.
Calmer than you are.
I'm calmer than you are.
I'm good.
All right. So, well, for myself, Montrey, I revisited the band and all of that when we went up there, and that was when I really started to, pay more attention. Obviously, that was post our strong conversation on the way back from Asheville. The last hour, we had a 9 hour strong of wonderfulness, and then all it took was one Bob Dylan song. And, then all of a sudden Phil hated Bob Dylan for a second. But that was like what I was trying to explain then is that I was willing to go listen, and I get it. And I got it then too, but I wanted to go check it out. The band I hadn't really checked out enough at that time. And, I'm glad I have done so. And then since Vin and I have been talking about it the last couple of weeks, I've really gotten revisited again. It's really been helpful to have people steer me towards like now the basic catalog here, like you're saying, the stuff that's a little bit further out. So Vin had talked about like W.S. Walcott last week, one that I definitely not as familiar with. And as soon as I turned that on, I was like, oh man, this is killing, and not like I didn't know Ophelia, but like the particular version that Vin was pointing out, that kind of stuff. Like it's killing stuff. The sound that you're talking about, Montrey, and that's basically what he was ending up with, was just that, the ultimate, how their sound developed came about from how they came about. To be in the basement was definitely, like I said on the last episode, was that it was powerful, even for somebody who wasn't as, at that point necessarily as strongly connected. But like, how could you not be in this house going like, there were some things made in this house, like some real shit has gone down right here in a good way, and it's hard not to, feel that and then want to go. I definitely took some time to just go sit outside and just go listen to songs from Big Pink. And to just sit outside and be there going like, this shit was made right there. And so there's a lot of that stuff that I naturally am drawn to. But the sound of that stuff you can hear when you've been in the basement, you see how they really did it. Even if you've heard all about it, to actually be there like, okay, well, this is like 7 feet away. Like, and that's how you can hear that in the songs and in the recordings. You can hear this is how this got done. The piano, as Alex was talking about last week, you can kind of you picture the piano in the place it was, although if I remember correctly, where it was when we were there was not the place it was actually.
He explained. Yeah.
But at the same time, you can hear the sound of that room. You can hear all of it. I can't tell. Vin is with us, right? Vin, I think you can talk, man. I think it's safe. I definitely don't want you to just not be talking.
Worried.
I'm pretty drunk and high too right now. So.
All right. Well, Vin is tuned up and trying to tune in.
That is the name of the podcast, right?
I'm pretty tuned up and tuned in right now.
So you were talking about you had a couple tunes that you might want to add to the playlist this week that we might have just missed along the way.
Well, yeah, definitely. And I think the first two that I really want to talk about are Bob Dylan tunes. And I think these two tunes are in some ways might be seen as like sacrilegious in some way of Bob Dylan tunes to think are cool, but I think they're really fucking cool.
I'm interested.
The first song is Joker Man. Do you guys know that tune? Joker Man by Bob Dylan. It's kind of like it's a little goofy, a little like Kokomo-ish, you know. And but I think that tune is really fucking cool. And you know, I don't know what else to say about it, man. Like it was a tune like when I first got into Bob Dylan, I was in high school, early high school. I did like the Bob Dylan wannabe thing when I was like a freshman and sophomore in high school. So early in high school, I had like discovered Bob Dylan for myself and fucking fell in love with the whole like fucking end of the beat generation and shit like that for a little while. And so like I had a fucking, you know, Bob Dylan greatest hits CD that I had gotten from an actual fucking CD store in my town in Pequannock, and fucking Joker Man was like on it. It was mostly like all the like great stuff, the fucking Blowing in the Wind, the Mr. Tambourine Man, you know, like a Rolling Stone, all the fucking great ones you could think of. But like there were like 3 or 4 of like his more modern kind of shit, and this was one of them. And I don't know, man. It just, like I said, it has like almost like a Kokomo vibe to it. Like it's a little different, and fucking he plays harp on it, and it's like I don't know what year this came out. I'm guessing in the 80s, you know. He plays harp on it. It's cool. It's a fucking. I think you should take a listen to that one and dig it. You know. And the other one I had of Bob Dylan's is "Serve Somebody," which same thing. It was on that fucking greatest hits record that I listened to day in day out after school, driving around Packanack Lake, fucking, you know, bullshitting with fucking whoever. Serve Somebody, man's got some really cool chords in it and shit. Well, it's a blues. Maybe Joker Man's got fucking cool chords in it too. Fucking Serve Somebody just got like a badass fucking vibe, and his lyrics in that too I feel like are not super typical Bob Dylan style. You know, the lyrics in both those tunes are like a little more simpler, a little more to the point, you know, and not so like trying to make you guess, you know. Kind of like Alex said last week, like he enjoys Bob Dylan on the surface, you know, and there's nothing wrong with that. And these two tunes are definitely two tunes that like you don't even have to know are by Bob Dylan, but like when they come on, it's like, yeah, man, this is fucking cool tune. Who is this? And you're like, oh shit, that's Bob Dylan. Then you start recognizing the voice, you know, because he's like, I don't know, the way he sounds in the '80s is like in between the way he used to sound, the way he sounds now, you know. Oh shit, you're like, oh shit, yeah, that's fucking Bob Dylan. I thought those two tunes were fucking mad cool though, and they deserve a listen. So put them on the fucking playlist and listen to that shit and dig it and just like enjoy them for what they are. Like Alex said, like enjoy them on the surface, you know.
I'll do that for you, Vin. I'm gonna do that.
The other thing that I wanted to talk about, sort of, on the band side, is some Levon Helm fucking solo records. I think everyone who is a fan of Levon knows these two records. It's Dirt Farmer followed by Electric Dirt. And I think those two fucking records are dope, man. Wait, I was going to fucking look at the fucking playlist while I did it. Dirt Farmer, man.
Yeah, that's not on there yet.
Dirt Farmer is mad cool. The Mountain is fucking a great tune on that. Or can you hear me?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, we got you.
The Mountain is mad cool. Like, there's so many good tunes. On both records, he also sprinkles in these really funny blues fucking covers too. Like, he does a little Walter tune on one of them. Where is it? He does That's All Right. Fucking maybe that's the one I'm thinking of. That's All Right. He does some really cool blues stuff. The record Electric Dirt starts with Tennessee, his version of Tennessee Jed, which those who know me know that I'm not a huge Grateful Dead fan. But I mean, that's where I know that tune, Tennessee Jed. Did somebody do it before the Dead? Do you know?
I don't know. I think it's theirs.
Yeah,
I think it's a Dead tune, right?
Yeah, it's written by Jerry Garcia and Robin Hunter. Yeah.
Word. Yeah. Like, I don't know that shit, but when I hear Levon doing it, it's kind of the same way that I like Atlantic City by the band, you know? I think he just has an ability to cover shit in a way that, I don't know, he just turns these tunes that are already pretty rootsy into, like, real hardcore, like, Appalachian fucking covers. That's kind of how I feel about Tennessee Jed. It's got Kingfish on it, which is a cool tune. Every tune on both those records are badass. And I just think that they need to be listened to. If you don't know them, I mean, don't write off the Levon stuff, because this is like some of the last Levon stuff we have, you know. Did he maybe put out one other thing after Electric Dirt, possibly? But,
no, well, I was going to say, I definitely personally have not gone that, like, I haven't really looked too much into their solo careers. I know Levon in particular has, a catalog, and
Levon's is the best to me, followed very closely by Rick Danko had a record. I don't know what it's called. We should have asked Alex last week, because he knows all that shit. But Rick Danko had a record right after the band split up that was fucking dope. It was beautiful. I don't remember off the top of my head what it's called. We'll have to ask Alex.
Yeah. Do some research, get that on the playlist there too.
Yeah.
Well, so Montrey,
yeah.
what's a tune that sticks out to you, man? And don't, like, I always end up feeling like I picked the low hanging fruit. Maybe I'm a simpleton. But I always, I mean, I didn't go like, oh, I like the weight. I haven't said that yet, but I like the weight. I'm not.
Well, you got to start somewhere, man. I mean, that's I'll say a couple things about it. Like, you don't get into bands because of the deep cuts. That's the stuff you find later. Like,
sure,
you get into it. Like, as somebody once said to me, and like, and this was in reference to the Grateful Dead, actually. The point was, like, if the Grateful Dead never wrote Touch of Grey, millions of people never would have heard Terrapin Station. And it's a valid point. You could make that parallel with any band. The point being is, you write a song that's popular enough, you're opening up the rest of your catalog to the whole world. And that's the one that's going to break through. Now, in as far as the band, well, a couple things off what Vin was saying. So Joker Man's on Infidels. That's produced by Mark Knopfler.
Interesting.
Dire Straits, obviously.
Yeah.
I didn't know
his
that.
own career. He plays guitar on that too. And that was an interesting album for Dylan. That's like 83. And he was in a weird space there for a little while.
Like I said, it may be sacrilegious, but I thought that tune in particular has some cool shit going on in it.
Oh no, it's yeah. Well, it was. I mean, no one was immune to, like, for better or worse. I'm not even saying this is a negative, but like the production characteristics of
the 80s
time. Yeah, it's just what it was. And like
everybody
was doing it. Bruce did it. Everyone we love.
It's right. And so you get the music that you get from that time, and Serve Somebody was that's actually on a live album called Dylan and the Dead, because Dylan and the Dead did several tours where the Dead would Bob Dylan would open up a set, the Dead would play, and then they'd play a set with Dylan as the Dead as his band, and some phenomenal shit came out of that, man. And Serve Somebody's on. They wound up putting with the Dead, all the live shows are out there. They wound up actually putting out one CD of what they felt were like the 10 or so best songs from that whole tour, and one of them was Serve Somebody. And Garcia went really deep into the Dylan canon and catalog and everything. And one thing that always struck me that he said, and I think I still say this to this day to lots of people, was, Dylan obviously, as a lyricist, conceptually, and all these concepts about music, but his point was, it's not like, that's fine, but you got to like the song first. Like the song, he still wrote good songs. Like people don't like songs because of the lyrics. They might try to tell you otherwise, but that happens after. Like, there needs to be melodic and rhythmic connectivity that brings you to something and wants to hear it again. And then you want that message might be strong enough where you like it even more than you did, or whatever the case might be. But the song has to be the song, and the song is essentially melody and rhythm in a way, and Dylan's delivery cannot be underrated. Like, regardless of characteristics of his vocal qualities notwithstanding, there's a delivery aspect, there's a cadence, there is an honesty to what he is saying that you receive, and then that matters to you. Like there's lots of singers like that, man. Tom Petty, Jeff Tweedy, that's how they're connecting to you. And for me, he was just so dialed in with that shit, that it was spun me around in circles. And one of the first songs that I really loved of his that wasn't one that you would necessarily think of all the time was a song called Love Minus Zero.
Yeah.
Which is just such a, it's the words are cool, man. You think about them afterwards, but the whole melodic cadence of that thing. And Dylan was the way he wrote songs was he'd print it like it was the songs were just the A, very rarely did Dylan write songs that would go A, B, C, B. No, it was just A. It was just it was just one linear path, and then it would start again. And it was you could break that linear path in half and call it a verse and a chorus, but that's just what it was. And from Mr. Tambourine Man to Visions of Johanna, which is one of my favorite Bob Dylan songs. That one I should mention. But that was just the way he wrote almost all the time. And which is impressive to think that he could continue to be that successful of a songwriter using that writing method over and over and over and over and over again. Sure. And I mean, other songs that I love The Man in Me. I mean, we've covered that one with my band in the past, which made its rather, shall we say, ubiquitous appearance in The Big Lebowski.
Yeah, we've talked about it. Vin brought that one up a couple weeks ago.
That's a more one you don't see as much out there. But If Not For You, the whole New Morning is a great album, and that's what that's on. And it's got tons of good songs on it. And Dogs Run Free. I mean, that said, I've seen Bob Dylan live several times in my life. And the one time I went to see him back in 93, fall of '95, which was right after Jerry Garcia died. And Bob Dylan and Jerry Garcia were very close, and as musical companions and as friends. And that was a kick-ass concert Dylan put on that night, man. He played all kinds of shit. He did a couple Dead tunes, Alabama Getaway, Friend of the Devil. Just killed it, man. I also saw him come out with the Dead, the Grateful Dead, not the myriad of other Grateful Dead like imposters. In '94 at Madison Square Garden to do Rainy Day Women. But I also saw Dylan, 5 years ago in Asbury Park Convention Center, and I couldn't understand a word he was saying. But
I may have been at the same show. Wait,
Leon Russell. This one was with Leon Russell, and the fire alarm went off. I was like, and nobody knew what to do because we couldn't decide if it was real or not. Now, you don't remember
when
that.
did I? Because I saw him at the Asbury Park Convention Center, but I don't remember the fire alarm going off. But
you wouldn't have forgotten.
I
that.
do remember
Leon
having
Russell?
a cigarette pack full of joints.
Yeah,
and selling them in the crowd, like not going to do that. I was like, I'm gonna smoke 10 joints while I'm there.
God damn
And
it.
fucking, I rode down with my buddy, fucking Dan Crooks, and we smoked a few joints on the way down. I'm like, great, we have like 7 left for the show. And once we started sparking up, people were like, yo, can I buy one off you? I'm like, yeah, bro, sure, fucking, yeah, whatever. And fucking, that was a great time. But I don't remember the fire alarm going off. I think I would have. That was all we were doing was drinking beers and smoking joints.
Well, was Leon Russell there? That's the question.
Nah, I don't think so.
So then you
would have
remember
remembered
that.
that.
Yeah, I would have remembered. I would have remembered something like that.
It was a double bill of Leon Russell and Bob Dylan when I was there.
It was a much more tame night than the night you had, apparently.
Yeah, it seems that way. Yeah, it was. But there's some songs on the more recent albums that I do like. Time Out of Mind was a great album. That's probably around 2000 or late 90s. I think they won a Grammy. But I mean, Desire is such a good album. He's written so many good songs, man. But probably if I had to, I don't know that I could pick a favorite Bob Dylan album, but if I was only left with one that I could hear, I'd probably take Blood on the Tracks.
That's a good one.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because his guitars is almost entirely tuned in open E for that entire album, and it's like songs like Buckets of Rain and You're Gonna Make Me Lonesome When You Go. We used to cover that song too years ago. I love that. That might be my favorite. It's hard to beat that one for me. Shelter from the Storm's on that, and it's something about the way that sounds too. That's the interesting thing about guys like him. It's like, Bob Dylan, obviously, he was never kind of guy that was going to play lead guitar or write some progressive fugue of some kind, right? But he would. So as a result of that, maybe or maybe not, but point being is that's not happening. So he experiments musically in different directions, right? He writes an entire album in open tuning, that doesn't happen that much, but it changes the way things sound, sonically. It's the same 4 chords in E, but it's not. And
right. No, there's no question. Open string tuning of any, there's something that happens differently, and that's why all of folk music and all that stuff happens in those open, in your country. That's
blues, man. Blues.
All that stuff. I think what it is that you've got the sympathetic resonances of the strings. You get the fullness. They're even if there are strings that are going to ring out.
Right, voicings that you can't recreate. It's because when people try to cover Rolling Stone songs and they just kind of don't sound exactly right. That's because Keith Richards' guitar was always in an open tuning, and
slightly out of tune from that tuning always too.
There's definitely something about the sound.
Not always, but
just
most of
chops,
a lot of the time. A lot of the golden era Rolling Stones shit is all the great riffs. Most of the great riffs are in open tuning, either G or E or D.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't sound right if it's not that way. And
Yeah, you're right.
I found a lot of that with the Dylan stuff too. And I wound up like going into those tunings to play some of them, but it was definitely. I mean, the guy's really an anomaly in so many ways. Like, not only is he, who he is and the legendary status that he is, but I was talking to somebody about it the other day. Did you guys watch the Rolling Thunder Review documentary?
I haven't yet.
No, you got to watch that, man. That thing's amazing. That's like you could argue in a way, right? I don't want to say peak Dylan, because that's like almost impossible for a guy like him, but because in the late 60s, he was so popular, it was absurd. But like when he took the band and they went and played these places and they were getting shit thrown at him, and the band had no idea. They were like, Bob Dylan wants us to be his band, And I mean, that's one of the coolest fucking stories in the history of rock and roll. I don't give a fuck. Like, you get these guys, Bob Dylan, they're going out and playing electric rock and roll, and people are fucking booing them. And they're like, and they're kind of just like,
they just trudge right through it.
We're coming
They just
back.
trudge right through it. Yeah, it's hilarious. Wait,
hey,
what's the one documentary where they have him, like Bob Dylan, turn into the band and saying, he's like, okay, we're gonna do one more, and like they're just like booing.
Yeah.
And he turns around and he goes, play it fucking loud.
Yeah,
It counts it up and fucking.
It might be the coolest story in the history of American
really
music.
is. You're right.
Like, it's crazy. That was going on
Night after night, basically a whole tour's worth of going out on stage and immediately being booed and booed for the entire set. Relentlessly, like people trying to boo louder than you.
What's crazy is that people were buying tickets just to go do that.
Yeah, out of resentment. Like it was nuts, man. And like when he goes out and like he like later on in the 70s and they do the Rolling Thunder Review thing, it's like he's just Bob Dylan got to a point, I think, too, where like he just started to fuck with people, like, because he just couldn't. I don't want to say he couldn't deal with it anymore, but he was just like, I don't really like. You guys paying so much. Imagine being Bob Dylan. Like you're this guy who has garnered so much attention to yourself. You're considered like some kind of prophet to some extent, when in reality, like, he's looking at himself like he's just a guy that plays music. And then he starts to realize that like everything he says is taken with such significance. And it's like, it just became like a charade. His life was like a constant act, like a gimmick, and but not. It's almost like his lyrics, It sounds like nonsense, but really it probably fucking means more to you than like anything you've ever fucking heard. Like, and he's really, if nothing else, he's one of the most unique artists in like the history of modern civilization. It's inexplicable, and it will probably never happen again. His relationship to both humanity and society at the same time in that context is really unparalleled, especially for a musician. It's not anything I've seen. I haven't seen anything like it.
Sure.
It's crazy. But the band, since that was part of the conversation.
No, yeah, both. All of it.
As far as songs go, so Duke, our bass player, plays in Mike Montrey band with Phil also, and he's always been a really big fan of the band, heavily, and I've always obviously liked them as well. But a couple of tunes that I really have always enjoyed. Caledonia Mission is one. It's a great song.
Yes. Oh man.
And you know, Robbie Robertson used to write these songs for these guys to sing because he saw it that way. You know, he wrote a song that Danko would sing. He wrote a song that Richard Manuel would sing. He wrote a song Levon Helm would sing. It was his way of like thinking that this person was the person to convey this message, you know? And Danko, It Makes No Difference. That's like, that might be one of the best songs.
He's got like some of the most heartbreaking songs, dude.
And
his voice, that's like, and rightfully so, like like you said, like his voice is paired up to those lyrics and melodies. Just it's a thought. Like I think it really was a thought. You know?
Yeah, he was thinking. He was
as a band that had multiple lead vocalists. You know,
right.
It's like, well, what would like emote the most energy, you know, in a way, the way we want to mold it, you know? It's like nothing's better than having 3, if not 4 vocalists, you know?
Yeah, to tell the story. Yeah. And sometimes more like there's another great song, Acadian Driftwood.
Yeah. Later band.
Yeah, that's
I was arguing that actually with Alex Tierney not last week, but while I was talking to him on the phone to put him on last week. And I was arguing with him, I was like, man, like I kind of like that fucking whole record. And he's like, yeah, but it's like the last band record, you know. He's like, yeah, I like it, but
well, shit got weird, man. They didn't, you know, things didn't work out.
He's a real band purist, you know.
Well, Robbie Robertson, it's an interesting talking point though, because Robbie Robertson gets portrayed in those tight circles of that whole situation as being kind of an asshole, because he essentially seized control of something that maybe didn't need to be seized control of, but he also wrote like all those fucking songs. It's like,
that's what makes being a fan of the band like a weird thing. Is like, do I have a side on this? Like, where do I stand on the like? You know what I mean? Like, and then you hear stories that like that like to Levon's deathbed, the fucking rivalry was on. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, it was a
you know, who do you listen to? Like I said last week about have you ever read Levon's book, This Wheel's on Fire? Have you ever read it?
I have read some of it. Yes, like somebody sent me pieces of it, but I haven't read that book.
You should just buy it on Amazon for $5 used. Wait the 9 days for it to come.
No, I'm Audible. I'll go Audible on that shit.
All right. You got the dough to lay down on the Audible. Fucking dude, it's fucking you know, like you don't know what. Sometimes that's what makes being a fan of the band like weird. Is that dynamic of how it was left, you know?
Well, yeah, and also, but there's a reality to it too, in the sense that Robbie Robertson also, like him or not, held that thing together. I mean, Danko and Manuel were junkies, and
it was bad, and completely fucking drunks.
Yeah, it was to a point where like you know they were like, you know, MIA at times, and it's just, you know, I don't know. Like, it is what it is. I'm glad it happened. And maybe it had run its course, man. That's the other thing too. I mean, I don't know that there was
because like you said earlier, they were a band for so long before the band
Right. They had
finally
been
happened, you know?
right.
Like,
They had been
they were
coexisting,
together
sleeping
with,
in
with
rooms.
Ronnie
Right.
Hawkins and shit, and they had already had a full career
Yeah.
in fucking rockabilly, dude.
Absolutely.
Touring in Canada and the southern United States with Ronnie Hawkins, man. Like, and Levon and the Hawks, you know what it came at in between the band and fucking Ronnie, you know.
No,
All this
true.
shit. They were living in fucking. Do you know they lived in Wildwood for like a couple of summers and played in Wildwood every summer?
Yeah, that was a spot. That was it's true. Yeah, they would do whatever they could, man. That
the
was
early '60s. Yeah, yeah.
it was just rock and roll, man. That was all that was. They were around each other a lot, and I think that in the end, it just became what it became. But whatever. I mean, they made some phenomenal music, obviously, and it
Some of
impacted
the greatest fucking music, man.
Yeah, it impacted people significantly too. Like I mean, I know Eric Clapton at the time. He wanted to quit playing. That's why he did it. The whole Delaney and Bonnie thing, which was essentially like that Americana type vibe. Like,
Yeah, we talked about that last week too.
Yeah, that all came out of the band. It's their impact on American music was significant, and it's you know, I'm glad it happened. I mean, there was some, they left behind a lot of good stuff, man. But to your point about the Atlantic City too, that
Exactly.
Levon
The stuff that comes after that is there's some magic, you know.
Yeah. The Levon version was the reason I started playing that song too, as a matter of fact.
Sure.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, yeah.
That was actually the origin of that thinking.
Because it's so natural coming from Levon. He sings it so he knows he really can take a song and make it his own. Man.
It is definitely one of those cover songs that if you didn't know it was a Bruce song first, if you had only heard the band version first, it wouldn't be shocking to you if you were like, that was a band song.
Right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But
well, Springsteen's original version is dark as fuck, but
I mean, we're not gonna argue there. That is
yeah, which was also very cool. But Levon's a legend, man. In the end, like, even though Robbie Robertson, well, I'll tell you a good story though. So one of the festivals that we've played many years, Phil played it a couple times, or at least once, Black Potato Music Festival. Last year we played it. McGinty played with us.
I did it twice with you.
Yeah, twice, right?
Yeah.
So that guy who runs that, Matt Angus, he had Levon play drums with him on several occasions at that festival, actually, a couple times that we played it. And he actually recorded several songs with Levon and Larry Campbell on guitar.
Wow.
He's played with Dylan. He was Dylan's guitarist forever. And Phil, Lesh, and other people. And he told me a story once where they were going to track a tune, and Levon was the drummer, and whoever was producing the record came out and suggested that they use a click to get the tempo, you know. and Levon was like, I'm the fucking click. The fuck out of here. It was like, nope.
yeah.
Sounds about right.
dude. There was a man, I fucking wish I was home. I had bought this record from fucking the guy in Pompton Lakes. What the fuck is it called? Flipside Records in Pompton Lakes. I bought final of fucking. It was like Muddy. It was a Muddy Waters record, but recorded in the Catskills in the fucking late '60s with like Paul Butterfield and Levon Helm and fucking that whole cast of characters as Muddy Waters band. It's like it's kind of goofy in that way when you look at it from the blues side of it, but from the fucking basically the rest of the world, fucking it's so cool to fucking hear that shit. And fucking I think like Garth Hudson was on it too and shit.
Yeah, he's interesting, dude.
Yeah.
That they had to convince that when he joined the band, they had to go with the story that they told his parents that they were hiring him to teach them music.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Garth, yeah.
He's a classically trained dude, but he's out. He's crazy, like organist, man. Chest fever, dude. Chest fever.
Chest fever.
Chest fever. Yeah.
Extended Garth Hudson intro.
Nice.
Yeah, it's badass.
I know she's a tracker.
Yeah. When he finally like comes into the song, is drops on that fucking organ riff, dude.
Yeah, it's badass.
Bow, bow, bow. It's like the heaviest organ fucking sound you've ever heard in your life.
Yeah, that was a killer tune, man.
Suggested hearing the fucking Last Waltz version too.
Last Waltz,
just
man. That could be a podcast in and of itself. That was
version on Last Waltz is banging.
Yeah, you know they had to edit the video of that to like edit out the
They edited a lot of shit.
Oh yeah,
Eminem face and Eric Clapton's face.
yeah. They didn't do a very good job with the Neil Young editing, though. You can definitely. There's some shots there where you can just there's like
There was a room in the backstage. There was a room back there, and the whole room was just a mirrored table, and on the wall there were just all rubber noses. That was it. That was the room.
nice.
That was the room. Yeah, it was bonkers, man. That's a great story too. Like how that came to be. But amazing. I mean, people like are reenacting it still, like on an annual basis. It's crazy.
Sans cocaine.
Well, maybe not. But
They're doing it wrong.
yeah, you have to fully immerse yourself in it, man.
No, the whole thing is crazy. That in particular, you know, because you had Scorsese directing it like a movie, you know. So it's like Robbie, you got to stand over here. You know?
No, it got hairy, and that's I think
Put this guitar on. It'll look great. It's gonna look great.
That was some of the falling out with those guys was that, you know, Robbie Robertson wanted to get Neil Diamond in there and like was willing to bounce Muddy Waters to do that, and like guys like Levon and Rick Danko were like, we can't do that. It's a no knock on Neil Diamond.
They really wanted to have Sonny Boy Williamson too on the show, but he had died before then.
Well, he was the guy.
I thought the next best thing was to have Muddy.
Yeah.
Who they had encountered many times.
Yeah, more than once.
You know. Anyway, but they really, because of the story and in Levon's book again, couldn't recommend that book enough. Fucking, he tells the story about how they found fucking Sonny Boy in Helena, Arkansas. Fucking had a black fucking gin joint, you know. And they sat down and they fucking drank with him and were shooting the shit with him and fucking. You got to just read it. It's a whole big story. It's a long story. Yeah. They jam with him though. They jam with him at the end of the story and fucking, you know. And then Levon notices Sonny Boy just like spitting blood into a empty beer can, and it was like a couple of years just before, or a year before, Sonny Boy finally passed away. Which I've seen his grave too, by the way. I visited his grave in the Mississippi Delta a couple of years ago when I was on tour. It was dope.
Yeah, man.
But Muddy is definitely a great fucking call, and it's cool that they have Muddy. And yeah, but you're right, man. Fucking, he talks about that story too. It's a big thing, obviously, in the Levon Helm book, where he's like, he like really fought for Muddy to stay on the show.
Right.
Which is insane to think that somebody would have to fight so hard for Muddy Waters to stay on a show to verify your rock and roll credentials, essentially to end cap your like fucking band's career. You know what I mean? You're not going to pay respects to fucking Muddy Waters. But I digress, and I don't hold it against anybody. You know what I mean? But that's just where I stand on that. I'm gonna have to go with Levon on that one.
Yeah, well, yeah, he's usually right. He's usually right. Yeah, well, it's an interesting story nonetheless. But like we said, lots of good music.
The whole thing is great, man. From fucking when they fucking joined Bob Dylan in Europe and they get booed fucking everywhere, to fucking moving to Big Pink, to fucking just the whole story, man. You gotta fucking check it out. You gotta check out the music. The music is fucking fantastic, especially if you're an American.
Whoa.
And fucking, you know what I mean? This shit will just make you feel like lighting a fire and cracking open your favorite beer and fucking maybe strum a guitar or not. Just enjoy the fucking crisp, cool autumn air while the fire's burning and the beer's cold.
That was a hard sell, Vin. I liked it. That was a hard sell. Unless we forget that the band were essentially the original initiators of what would become the Woodstock Music Festival. That was born out of the band's concept, and then the explosion that followed it, and what wound up transpiring. But that was like essentially their plan to create this event, and it's turned into just crazy, essentially, like,
And do you know the story about why their set wasn't included in like the fucking movie and shit? Have you ever heard about like because they left Robbie's mic on, and Robbie fucking liked to appear to be singing, but should never have been actually audio.
Like they shouldn't audible. You shouldn't have been able to actually hear him.
Yes.
Yeah, but there was other issues with that too, where they like they never signed off. Like they got helicoptered in and out of there, the band, and it was all fucked up. Like, because obviously they didn't know. Like when the whole thing with Hendrix, so you talk about like, one of the most iconic moments in the history of rock and roll, with him like playing at dawn. Was the reason that happened was because the band were supposed to, because it was the band's thing. Like they were the ones that originated the concept. They were supposed to headline that night. But Hendrix, apparently his manager at the time said he wouldn't play if he wasn't the last person on. Now, none of them knew that this entire thing would get knocked back like 7 hours from when it was supposed to fucking, because of how long everything took, right? And so the band wind up like playing in the middle of the fucking night or some shit, like 3:00 in the morning, and Hendrix, because of that circumstance, winds up playing at dawn, and you get the fucking Star Spangled Banner. That's like the perfect image of America if the aliens come in like 500 years. It's like, that's it. Just show them that. And like, I don't need to see anything else. But that just unraveled that way. I mean, the whole thing was just nuts, man. You know, like, I mean, think about, like, I know it's not directly related to the band and Bob Dylan, but, you know, since the band with their prevalent role in creating Woodstock in that context, but like Richie Havens, he was the first guy up there, right? And he was the first guy up there because, like, they were having all kinds of problems getting people in, right? And they had, like, most of the stage built. And Richie Havens goes out there with, like, a bongo player and, like, one other guy. And there's, like, hundreds of thousands of people in front of him. It's like, and they're just like, you know, just fucking play, you know? And he wrote that song, Freedom. He wrote it there. He made that up. And that, like, it's just crazy. Like, he played like 5 or 6, he played whatever set was, and they were like, we don't have anybody else to go on. It's like, it's just nuts, man. Like, that the whole thing is fucking nuts. It's you'll never see shit like that again. And the band, to circle it all back, they were at the center of that whole concept because they decided with Bob Dylan that they were going to go to live in Woodstock because they wanted to live in a place where they could create the art they wanted to create and be surrounded by it. And that ultimately was the culmination of that idea. Like, that, their idea, the band and Bob Dylan's idea of artistic representation in an environment that they wanted resulted in Woodstock, which is the greatest symbol of artistic representation in music in the last century, at least. And so if there's ever an impact, even though it's indirect to the average person, because it's been fucking soundtracked and documentary fucking out their ass, but it's like, that's the origin of that exact thing. And Albert Grossman, who was the manager of Bob Dylan and the band, he deserves a lot of credit for that, man, because that guy forged the path, you know, to make a lot of these things happen. And he lived there, and it was a communal concept, and to create that experience was not, I guess I would say it was not by accident. Like, they wanted to create, and I don't think they ever envisioned it turning into that, you know, but it was ultimately the end result of what those guys created in the first place, like that scene, and that came there. And it's like, what can you say, man? There's nothing really that is a parallel to it. Like, as far as like, my parents were there. For whatever that's worth.
Yeah. My aunt was actually there too. She was like real close. Like, you can see her visibly in the famous Woodstock movie poster. I can go like, there's my aunt.
Topless.
No. But yeah, no, she's in it. It's actually a real short story, but it's an interesting all around thing. She was there. She was, at the time, I believe she was making jewelry. And so they had a flea market section to Woodstock. And if you were invited to participate as like a vendor in the flea market, you were given, she has her letter. That's an official letter. And it's impressive because we kind of think of Woodstock as like being a total mess of everything. But it showed at some point, there was organization at some point, and then all hell just broke loose because it was a typewritten letter. Mm-hmm. It was very clear that the event was going to start at such and such a time. By having this letter, you would be allowed to drive and park right there at the stage hours before the gates would open. And so she was there like early on inside before everybody else, and then set up. And because of that, legitimately was like a couple rows back from it. And the circle around everything is that the photographer of that whole event, I guess he was the Rolling Stone editor, was Baron Woolman was
Right.
and Baron Woolman, we ended up having a student at School of Rock who was related to Baron. And so I had a chance to meet Baron. I mentioned it to my aunt, and she's like, we're friends with Baron. They had somewhere along the line, they live out in New Mexico. He lives out in New Mexico. They met each other, and as a gift, he gave her a different angle of the same photo because he's the one that took that movie photo.
Wow.
And so it was a photo. It was the same photo, but it essentially had never been seen
Right.
by anybody. And he gave it as a gift. Pretty incredible. That, and actually for a gift from him that they got from my father is the Jerry Garcia photo with the finger missing, which was the first time. That was the first time that Jerry was open about, like that. He was showing it on the cover of a magazine that he didn't have the finger. And Baron actually thought he was like fucking with him. He like, he was like, what's up with your finger, man? And he's like, what do you mean? So we've got a signed copy of that here, which is pretty freaking awesome.
Yeah, for sure. That's great, man.
Well, like I said, for me, the last couple of weeks, I just wanted to, it served its purpose for me. I wanted to educate myself further by bringing in, some people that I thought were knowledgeable on the subject of these guys. And I'm glad that we did this because, like I said, it wasn't that I didn't have respect for the band
It's
or Bob
a little
Dylan.
nook in rock and roll history that can be, not overlooked because there are. I mean, obviously we know many fans, but it's not it's not the Jimi Hendrix and it's not the Van Halen of rock and roll. It has a little more to do with some depth.
I think we touched on some things that made them, part of their uniqueness is I think, and part of what made them what you're talking about to me is that they didn't have a true lead singer, like you're saying. There wasn't the face. They were all the faces, really. There were obviously, but at the same time, I don't know, not the same way that every other band had, the John Lennon or, where here's the front man. You know what I mean? I guess you could say that Robbie was kind of, in some, at least in the Last Waltz, they certainly were trying to dress him up that way.
Yeah, right.
But at the same time, we just said it, we were talking about Danko when he sang, they all brought their own thing. So I think that's the thing is that people, I think people like to have that to be able to, it's easier for them to be drawn to the band. Them being called the band, it's, ultimately is the perfect, it really is the perfect name because that the sum of them is out of all the other bands that I can think of, it's just like, well, that's the band. I don't, I'm expressing it poorly, but it only kind of ties back in to Mike that you're saying, like to you guys when you first discovered the band, that it was funny that they were called the band because it's like, what a stupid.
Right.
But if you really do look at it after the fact, you're like, they were just Bob Dylan's the band. They were way more than that. I'm not trying to say that's all they were, but you know what I mean. But like, that's how people might see them as like a unit as the band. I guess I'm expressing it very poorly, but like.
No, it makes sense the way you're saying. It's they're not the band. They weren't gonna go out there and be elaborate in their whole like stage show and etc. Or even for that matter in their way of like writing music. Like it wasn't what it was, and so it doesn't. To the casual observer of like 60s and early 70s rock and roll, they don't jump off the page like the Rolling Stones and Jimi Hendrix,
Sure,
Beatles, because they were never marketed as such. by themselves or really by anybody else.
Right.
And so therefore being considered, their name being the band, is suitable to that. And in hindsight, wound up in a way kind of putting them in a place that's like almost, especially by musicians, even more revered than some of the other people that attained a much higher level of popularity at the time,
Sure. I think we touched on that. I think Vin mentioned, it's it can definitely fall into that category of musicians' music. Not that it wouldn't, not that there aren't non-musicians out there that can appreciate it. There's obviously people out there that are non-musicians that appreciate the stuff. However, I think that musicians, if they take the time to listen, always will find and be truly impressed with what they find there, even if it's not normally their cup of tea. I think, and I think that was what this was for me. That's what I wanted to. It was not the band was not commonly played in my house when growing up. There wasn't a dislike for them. It was just that they're way more commonly heard the Grateful Dead. So that was what was on. And because of that, I naturally in that circle, I had heard of the band. I knew of Levon. I knew these people, but never really looked at them. So like I said, for me, this was awesome. I have a whole bunch of new songs that I've now already having a new fond feeling towards. I think Vin, you talked about
more to come.
Yeah, well, you talked about life as a carnival and that and that whole carnival sound and everything. Just really an interesting. I think Alex talking about the relationship to the harvest and was really really interesting to me last week.
There's a few more songs from last week that I need to give you from Alex's side.
Lay them on, send them on over. But otherwise, I think we've probably touched all the bases just about. And so we'll get the Spotify playlist up to date by the time this episode is out, so that you can follow along and check out any of the stuff that we might have mentioned today or mentioned in the past before. And Vin is going to be taking a commission on all of the copies of the Levon Helm book that are sold from here on out.
Nah, send that to fucking whatever he's got set up, No. Just buy it directly from them, Amy or whatever. Amy's probably handling fucking,
Get the stuff.
Find that shit and buy it directly from them. Read that book though, man. That book is badass, dude. If you like this music and Levon, the thing that me and Alex always used to say about that book was like, because it's an autobiography, right? But there was like a guy helping him.
Sure.
He's fucking credited on the book and shit. It's not hidden or nothing, but it's all written in Levon's voice. You know what I mean? The way his Southern Arkansas fucking accent would say shit is exactly how you read it and how it's written in that book, and it's so cool. It's a great rock and roll story, like Mike was saying, man. The whole story of Bob and the band in that era, and then the band beyond that, of course, and before that, it's all in that book. Check that book out, read it. It'll take you like 3 days if you're a heavy reader. I would say the most 3 days. It's not long, it's not a big book. Check that shit out.
Yeah, well, it's almost kind of like a legend. The way that you guys are talking about it. You were saying, Mike, the perfect storm. If there were the epic poem, if Homer were writing his epic poem of music, it would be about the band. It would be the story of the band.
Right.
And I don't mean not Homer Simpson. I meant I mean, maybe his story too. He might write about the band also.
I mean, that's a pretty American story.
Yeah.
We're gonna go there,
Well, like I said, check out the Spotify playlist. Still called Vin and Phil Show. it'll be up to date. And, you know, we'll have all our Venmo links down in the description box. Feel free to send some love our way if you got it. And then same thing with all of our music. I'll make sure that there's links to everything.
Download that shit. I need your money.
Yep, and you can. We'll get the pre-save link for the Montrey, the new Montrey project too.
Download that Montrey shit because he needs your money.
That's yes. And if you need Vin to get you some money, he's also hiring. And maybe we can send some money to get Vin some sleeves. You know,
some sleeves. Maybe
I
a
supposed to
an AC
for this?
unit.
I didn't know that was part of the deal.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, don't worry. I can do it in post. I'll just
AC unit.
I'll do it in post in the
Give me a
video.
little Kojak, you know what I'm
I
saying?
need a box fan for my window. Send me some fucking dough. I was saying today, I'm like dipping my toes into like some future shit that may be coming down the pipe. I don't know.
No, I'm
Dough to do it. I need some
Sounds
dough
like
to do
this
it.
sounds like its
Send me
own
some dough.
podcast, Vin.
Yeah. No, he's
Yeah,
good.
it could be. It could turn into one. The side project.
Well, rock
Vin
and
Mott
roll,
podcast.
man.
Nothing but old school Delta blues and homesteading.
Well,
Beer drinking.
I guess on that note, I guess we should do our deuces and pieces and all that. Thank you guys for tuning up and tuning in. See you all next time.
Fuck yes.